Shut up and sit down.
I am a radical libertarian.
And we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You deserve better.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
You just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
There you go.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
Because no one brings tear gas to a gunfight.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty.
This is the cherry on top.
This is FSM.
Hello, fighters. Welcome back to Fight for Liberty Live on Free Speech Media. I'm your host, David Fite, here to get you fired up about the men and women out here making the world a freer place through politics, activism, business, and more. And we are here live on Free Speech Media Network. If you're watching this over on the old streaming platforms like YouTube or Facebook, go on over in the link you'll find, in the description, you'll find a link to the Rumble or the Odyssey stream. Go on over, watch it there. They pay their creators better. They're less likely to yeet my channel off of existence. And we just kind of like the people that work there. So go on over there. If you're already on Rumble or Odyssey, give yourself a high five. You're awesome. We have an awesome show for you guys tonight. I'm super excited. We're joined by the newest member of the Lars Mapstead for President campaign. But first, we're going to show just a little bit of love to our sponsors. First up, we've got our newest one. If you like what you're seeing on the channel so far, check out our newest sponsor, MyArkit. Save your digital legacy for generations. Don't just save your pictures where they are at risk of being censored, deleted, or lost. MyArkit gives you security and privacy at a great price while telling the whole story in your own voice and writing. Unlike a cloud backup to just dump all of your random pictures, MyArkit has you upload one full memory at a time. A picture or short video post with text and or audio captions create a timeline that makes going back through your memories an easy and pleasant experience for you and your loved ones. Sign up for a 30-day trial today with our code FSM and see what the craze is all about. No payment info necessary. This is a true free trial. Go to myarkit.com using promo code FSM to support the channel. That's MYARKIT.com. Promo code FSM. You can sign up for a personal account to save your life forever, or if you have an important event coming up, you can create an event account. This will let attendees add photos and videos of for you and other admins to go through later and curate into a beautiful digital album for your upcoming wedding, convention, graduation, or shower. Again, go to myarkit.com to learn more. Use promo code FSM. I promise I will get that promo done down pat by next week. It's a new one. Bear with me, guys. Next up, as always, Blood of Tyrants Wine. You know them, you love them. If you're looking for a nice night in while also sipping on the blood of your tyrannical enemies, go on over to bloodoftyrants.wine. They have a nice Merlot. Now they just added a Pinot Grigio called Tears of Tyrants, and they also have an energy tea called Liquid Freedom. It's got about a cup and a half's worth of coffee, or cup and a half of coffee's worth of caffeine in that energy tea to get you out the door and fighting some tyrants and spreading some liberty. So go on over bloodoftyrants.wine, 10% off with the code FSM, and we would really appreciate it. They would really appreciate it. So go do that. But now, without further ado, on the show tonight, he was the campaign manager for Chase Oliver's Presidential Exploratory Committee, former executive director of the Libertarian National Party, and now senior advisor for Lars Mapstead for president, manager and director of many, many things, the one and only Tyler Harris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's good to be here.
My absolute pleasure. So I always like to start off with a sort of testimonial question. So I'm curious, how did you find out about the Libertarian Party, and then what actually hooked you into joining?
Oh, well, those are two stories that are separated by many, many, many years, but they're both good ones. So I got bitten by the political bug very, very early. The first campaign that I worked as a presidential campaign was as a 16-year-old during the 2000 election cycle. And so I was a Republican at the time. I worked George W. Bush's campaign 2000. Nice. And I grew up in Sonoma County, California, which those of you familiar with California geography, that's wine country north of San Francisco. Very, very, very liberal county. I want to say like 20% Republican registration or something like that. I've oftentimes said my first experience working in minor party politics is being a Republican in Sonoma County. And so as a 16-year-old Republican in Sonoma County, California, in 2000, I was probably the only campaign volunteer under the age of 60 in the county. So any youth event that they had, I would get deployed to. So it was my first experience tabling. It was my first experience giving public speeches. It was my first experience doing all of this stuff that I really had no business doing, representing a campaign. I was absolutely not qualified to represent in any meaningful way. But they were doing a youth event at the main sort of town square, Railroad Square in Santa Rosa, and so they sent me. The Al Gore's campaign had somebody there, and the Greens and Libertarians were tabling as well. And the fella at the table next to me, the Libertarian guy standing next to me all day, 20-something-year-old guy, we talked and had a great rapport. And when it came time to get up and give candidate speeches, I got up and I gave one of the most libertarian speeches of my life. In favor of George W. Bush's campaign 2000. But if you recall, I mean, this is pre-September 11th.
That's a good point.
Time frame here. This is before that came to define the presidency. People oftentimes forget the campaign that Bush ran on in 2000 was one centered around Social Security privatization. It was centered around a lot of market reform. It was centered around the idea of putting agency back in people's hands. So I gave this very oriented to a youth demographic, this thing like, the 16-year-old kid up here saying, hey, we bristle against authority. We want to control our own lives. We want to put power back in your hands. We should have the same attitude towards the state that we have towards our parents. We should demand more responsibility, demand more freedom, demand more ability to control our lives. And I stepped down off the stage, and this Libertarian guy is there smiling, shaking his head, and he goes, I loved your speech, but you're in the wrong party. So as a 16-year-old kid, I didn't appreciate it right away, but I eventually found out how right he was. I wish I still had his name, by the way. If you're still engaged and out there and that story sounds familiar, get in touch with me. I'd love to reconnect. But I remember it was the era of when public smoking bans were a big hot button issue in California, starting to roll out the idea of public smoking bans.
Oh man, you guys, they went so much worse since then. Now they're just banning all the smokable things, man.
You get me going down memory lane. We're gonna go some weird places. You chose to start here, my friend. But I remember being so impressed by this Libertarian guy, because not only was he smoking in public, which was a political statement at the time, right? But every time he'd take a drag, he'd take his cigarette and he'd hold it above his head, like he was the Statue of Liberty itself, with this cigarette up there, making all of the folks scowl at him. But he was going to do what he was going to do, and I always admired and appreciated that. And that was my first interaction with a Libertarian in the wild, and it was a very positive one, and left me very predisposed to the party for a long time. Now, how did I actually get to the party? I stayed in GOP politics for a long time, working a bunch of different campaigns. I was a college activist once I went to college. When I started my career, I stayed engaged as a volunteer and as an activist in a lot of campaigns, even as the GOP started drifting away from me and not lining up very well with the, lowercase L libertarian values that I held. I voted for Ron Paul in 2012. And when Ron Paul didn't get the nomination, I did a little bit of work on the Romney campaign, but man, did I not feel good about it at that point. Right? And so at the end of that campaign, which was a disaster in its own right, I told anybody who would listen to me, I was just absolutely insufferable. Anybody who would listen, I said, I'm not doing this again for the GOP. Like, I'm never holding my nose again for a candidate that I know doesn't represent me, that I know doesn't speak to my values, that is not, I love politics and everything, but I'm never doing this again for the GOP if they don't nominate a real libertarian, market-oriented, freedom-loving candidate who really can inspire me and speak to what I believe in. And so for 4 years, I tell everyone who will listen to this, and of course, what does the GOP go and do in 2016 is put Donald Trump up.
Right.
And so then I really had to either live up to all of my bluster and find a different path for myself, or lose all credibility whatsoever. So in 2016, I voted for Gary and joined the Libertarian Party officially. I called it capitalizing my L, because I've been a lowercase libertarian for a long time, became an uppercase libertarian. But so, people oftentimes will say, like, they're a Ron Paul libertarian, or, Gary Johnson brought them in the party, so they're a Gary Johnson libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that makes me a Mitt Romney libertarian, because if it wasn't for Mitt being so terrible, that was the push that finally put me into the LP.
I love that. It's funny. He's the person that got me, who almost hooked me into the GOP to start with. It's funny because, we spoke really briefly before we went live that, we thought we were way closer in age than we actually are. Because I actually don't remember pre 9/11 Bush. Like I basically my earliest memories really are 9/11, or some of like, it is the earliest, like, really clear, like, I can still recall hours of that day, like full clear memories. That's basically the first one. So I got into, when I started caring about politics, we were already basically knew that the Patriot Act was full of shit. We had already basically knew that the weapons of mass destruction weren't a thing. I was already, like, really, what's crazy is I was still a nationalist and pro-war. But we already knew that Bush basically lied us into a war, but we still had to win it, right? Because we couldn't let the terrorists get away with it. Like, that's basically where I was at. It's like, we might have started this under false pretenses, but, we threw a punch, so now we got to finish the fight.
Everybody talks about how, like, it's very common for people who leave political parties to talk about how the party actually left them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fair, and that's true in a lot of ways. But there's also certainly ways that I left the GOP. And, one of them was, I certainly, when I was a lot younger, I was a lot more hawkish than I am now. That's my, dirty laundry, so to speak. If we want to air that, I came a long way and evolved a long way on that. In a lot of other ways, I've been very libertarian for a very long time in my belief system, even in a GOP that was very socially conservative. Like, I was always supportive of gay marriage. I grew up knowing gay couples. It was always a thing where I felt like the party was out of step. But that is definitely an area that I evolved also. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I'm here. Yeah. But yeah, those were wild times. I think my earliest political memory, I've been trying to think of what it was since you mentioned yours, was probably the Berlin Wall coming down. That's like the earliest thing I can remember being something of national impact, where you sit there and you watch the nightly news and you see the images of it and you're like, oh, this is important. Mm-hmm. You don't even necessarily understand why it's important, but realizing that, like, oh, this is a thing that's worth remembering.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about 9/11, to be honest. I can very vividly, like, remember where my head was at, which is I gave zero fucks about what was going on. Like, I had no idea. Like, I knew my parents seemed to really care, and we watched the news all day instead of doing other things, and it was very strange, and everybody was kind of uptight, and Mom was really sad. Dad seemed weirdly vindicated, like they had just had some sort of prepper versus not prepper argument days prior or something like that, which I'm sure is a thing. And like I just remember the tension, but I also remember like not knowing what the fuck the tension was about, and I'm just like, okay, because to me, like, I couldn't really tell the difference between news and TV yet at the time. So like, I've seen explosions on TV a bunch of times. Like, this was just a building exploded. Cool, this is a cool movie. Like, that's just a thing that happens in the cool movies. And that's where I was 5. So, I was still
no, I mean, at that age, you really take your cues so much from your parents. That's what kids do at that age. I mean, I'm a dad myself now, and so kids that age really do look for like the tone and temperament of what's going on around them, how adults are handling things, and I think that's probably when we talk about those early memories. I mean, I certainly didn't understand the political significance of the Berlin Wall coming down. I understood that everyone was acting like it was quite important, and so that made me feel like I should pay attention, that it was probably quite important. But yeah, that makes sense. Now, see, and we were talking about our generational so we're both millennials. Is the ground we covered before going on air. But I'm on one end and you're on the other end. We're separated by quite a lot of distance, and so I'm on the end that I was 17 and had friends who were in JROTC, folks who knew that they were on a track that were going to go into the military, so it was very, very real and very, very heavy in that sense of like knowing that this is something that my generation is going to directly be dealing with in a very real way.
I think that kind of similar thing was one of the main things that really broke me out of being a war hawk, was because I was on the other end of the spectrum, and I have friends that I grew up with that also fought in Afghanistan. And
yeah, well, and how wild is that, and totally unacceptable, by the way, if we can libertarian soapbox that for a minute, that it's the same war, that here we are divided by 12 years between the two of us, and I'm talking about my friends going, and you're talking about your friends going to the same war.
Yeah, that's just that was really like one of the things that woke me up, is like, I have friends that are younger than me, so don't remember 9/11 at all. Or even my age, but just, I was homeschooled, and so I kind of had the ability to just sit in front of the TV all day, and it was a very different day than normal for me. I have other friends that are the same age, but just don't really remember it like that. So I have friends that don't remember 9/11, don't remember the aftermath of 9/11, don't really remember anything till like 03, 04, and went in to kill people to get payback for 9/11, a thing that they don't even fully remember. And the worst part is quite a few of them did still go to get payback for that. Like, there's that thing that they've just been spoon-fed so much of that propaganda even since. Like, I give Gen Xers a pass for being war hawks. Like, if you were 23 and had friends in the World Trade Center, like, that's a whole different experience than somebody who's just forming all of their opinions off of propaganda.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a fair point. It's baffling to me. I mean, as somebody who went in, I certainly was very hawkish after September 11th. That's where my headspace was. That's where my tribe was. That was very natural for me to go down that path. But yeah, I mean, I certainly had, like, not direct relationships, but like one degree of separation, from people who worked in WTC and were had just gotten out, or were not at work that day, or were not at work yet, or by those sort of margins. And it was something that was very, very real and felt very, very real, and I think it does a grave disservice to the reality of it, to turn it into this decades long horrible propaganda tool. I can't think of anything more disrespectful to the actual lived experience of days like that day than that.
Yeah, it's I mean, I feel like a dead horse that gets beaten in politics is the like slippery slope mentality, and this was definitely one where I mean, I guess it's a little bit less of that because we definitely dove off onto the slide, but, have kept going down it. But I think I want to kind of circle back to one of the first things that you mentioned because it was a crazy point to me. You were talking about the cigarette or the like public smoking bans in California being in 2000. So that's just 20 years ago, just a little bit more than that. And in that time that they've gone from, well, maybe we don't need to be smoking everywhere all the time. Come on, guys, to we're banning menthol cigarettes in most counties throughout the state. We're banning hookah. We're banning blunt wraps if they're flavored and stuff like that. And so like in 2020, 20 years later, I was in California petitioning to stop the statewide ban on most of that stuff, which we did win. But there's still countywide bans all over the state of California, making just all of that insane from a precedence that was set with, well, wouldn't you like to go to dinner and not have to like breathe in smoke at a restaurant coming from the smoking section?
Oh yeah, well, and I remember heated arguments. I mean, heated arguments. And keep in mind, I didn't admit to myself how libertarian I was yet, but arguing with people like, I don't smoke. I don't smoke, you don't smoke, we don't like smoke. I don't want to have to sit next to a cigarette in a restaurant. That's between me and the restaurant. Like that, there's no business that being a city ordinance. There's no business that being, a statewide thing like that. Those arguments have been happening for more than 2 decades. And it does seem to it's very, very difficult to get people to stop trying to make their personal preferences something that gets enshrined in legislation.
Yeah,
that's unfortunately an enduring struggle,
even in the LP.
Yes. Yeah, we're not immune.
Right. That's one of the things that stopped me from joining super gung-ho in the beginning is the whole like, well, we don't believe in laws, but if you elect us, we're going to change just a whole bunch of shit by executive order, and like all of this, like one person's going to get elected president and change everything. And I'm like, that sounds a little unlibertarian. I don't know if that's actually what I signed up for. That doesn't sound like, Gary was, I mean, I have my issues with Gary, but Gary was a very palatable candidate. That's who brought me into the party. And so he wasn't saying any type of like Kokesh level, we're just going to blow up the federal government on day 3 or whatever. Yeah. I just thought that stuff was insane and actually kept me like most of 2017, about half of 2018, I still was and then Larry came around and I was like, okay, I can get behind this guy and worked with him, and it's been downhill ever since.
Well, that's good. You're a Larry Sharp libertarian then. There's a lot worse kinds to be.
Right.
No, I mean, you raise a good point though with like, there are all kinds of different ways, and we certainly don't need more ways to divide us up as libertarians. But there are ways that you can think about things in terms of destinational policy. What does your utopia look like? Where do you want to be if you could wave a magic wand? There's directional sort of stuff. Which is, when we talk about how like, we'd support any tax cut, right? Like let's just move things in the right direction. We'd support any spending cut. Let's just spend less. We'll move it in the right direction. We got these directional sort of conversations. I think one of the things that we oftentimes gloss over is also just the mechanics of that, right? So you've got destination, direction, and you've almost got like the mechanical conversation. What is the mechanism by which we bring about the change we want to bring? So, there is a very valuable, important sort of idea that even if I can use a tool very effectively to do good things, if power is going to be handed off to my enemies tomorrow and they're going to have the same tool in their toolbox, how much damage are they going to be able to do with it? Yep. And, I think I'm a very radical guy destinationally. I'm very in line with libertarian values directionally. It sounds like you and I maybe share a predilection mechanically to also care about process and care about making sure that things are done in a safe way and a right way, in a way that's not going to backfire and lead to results that we don't want to see.
Yes and no. I feel like yes, but also partially no, which is why I'm not really in electoral politics anymore. I think that is the piece that's actually missing from like reality. Like, I just don't know if we have the time to do that before like empire collapses, World War III, something like that. and is kind of why I stopped doing a whole lot of electoral stuff, is because I'm not. I think we agree on how that would work, and I just don't think that we have the time to put in the effort most of the time. But I still support electoral liberty.
Yeah, I mean, I would propose to you a sort of Pascal's wager on that front. If you're correct, then it sort of doesn't matter what we do. But if there is time for it, and we don't make the attempt, then it won't happen. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me engaged and involved. Is the idea that, I wouldn't have 23 years in electoral politics and working campaigns and working elections if I didn't believe, wisely or unwisely, believe that in the individual ability to make a difference.
Yeah. I think that's one of my biggest gripes with a lot of ex-members of the party. Because like I resigned from like every position that I have in the party. I was never actually a dues-paying member of National, and there's no such thing in New York State. So I've left the party in almost every way that I can. I'm still a member of New York because I'm enrolled Libertarian. I checked the L box when I registered to vote, but I don't drag the LP. I don't drag candidates like Lars or even Josh Smith. Him and I have personal beef, but I'm not out here dragging his campaign, trying to do anything like that. Being like, what are you doing? It's hopeless. How are you ever going to get that 5% you're talking about? I don't go around saying that kind of stuff because I think, to your point, if I'm wrong, then maybe we should have a backup plan that in 10 years we can actually see some kind of a bench being built, some sort of an actual power within the libertarian movement. And if I'm right, that's why I'm out here doing stuff with like You Are the Power or other things that are more like harm reduction side of things. Is kind of what I've focused on since. Is like, I think that if the collapse is inevitable, which I think most libertarians would agree that it's at least inevitable unless we kind of take over in a sense, our job is to reduce how much damage is going to happen from the collapse, reduce how much damage is happening on a daily basis from the government, and wake more people up to the fact that the government is the problem and that the collapse is coming. And, you can do that through the party or through other nonprofits and other organizations. But, as long as you're doing one of those three things, I think you're on the right track.
Oh, yeah. I mean, You Are the Power is great, first of all. So I'm super stoked that you're engaged and involved there. All sorts of mutual aid, all of that sort of stuff. Really great action to take. I mean, go out and live libertarian principles. Don't just yell about politics. Most of the time at other libertarians, where I would agree it does the least good, right? So all of that stuff is fantastic. I'm perhaps a bit more cynical. This may have come with age, but I certainly think that existing systems have the potential to last a very, very long time, and that there's a great amount of value for us to try to see, our values and our beliefs enshrined in a way that helps preserve liberty, that helps preserve the scope of individual rights, that makes that impact. Because I've heard a lot of doomsday prophecies. I've survived a lot of collapses. I've survived a lot of the end is here. It's not none of them have been the end. The dollar is still the international reserve currency. There's a lot of ways that even a really, really, we acknowledge how bad the debt problem is. We acknowledge how crushing all of the weight of the bad decisions that 50, 100, arguably 200 years of government have stacked on top of each other, how heavy that weight is and how much of a drag it is. I am cynical enough to believe in its power to endure, possibly for the remainder of my lifetime, and even the generation that follows me. So I'm still heavily incented to try and make change to those systems.
I love the way that you're basically preaching a white pill and calling it cynical, though. That's great. I love that little twist. It's true. I guess I
well, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not good news, right? Like if you're looking to start over again tomorrow, it's I'm not spreading a cheery gospel here, but it is it's nonetheless, I think fairly likely that we've got the systems we've got for a good long while, and it makes sense to try to better them.
That's fair. I go back and forth on an almost daily basis, to be honest with you. I take like a handful of black and white pills on a daily basis, and I'm all over the spectrum on that one. And it really makes picking what I want to do with life difficult. Let me just tell you that. It is definitely a struggle sometimes. But speaking of which, back to my questions. I'm loving this.
Yeah.
How did you get wrapped up in being at the helm of the Libertarian National Party as executive director?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the short and easy answer is I showed up and didn't leave. When I started getting more involved in the party after Gary Johnson's 2016 run, I found my local Libertarian Party, discovered that I didn't have a local Libertarian Party, found my nearest local Libertarian Party and said, how do I start a local Libertarian Party? So I started building my county affiliate, and being here in Northern Virginia. When in I guess it would have been spring of 2018, Robert Kraus, the longtime operations director for LP National, needed some volunteer assistance to help get some paperwork in order for 2 or 3 days as part of the internal audit process that the LP does annually. And his longtime volunteer couldn't do it for whatever reason, but knew me and knew that I was building a party and knew that I was kind of between things and had time on my hands, and so suggested that I come in and do it. And so Wes Benedict was executive director at the time. I went in and I met Robert Kraus and Wes Benedict and said, first of all, I showed up suit and tie because I figure I'm going to the national epicenter of libertarianism, right? Like this is a holy place, and especially coming from like a couple of decades in GOP politics where everybody shows up suited up. I'm rocking and rolling, and yeah, Wes is in there like jeans and a polo. Robert Kraus is in there in shorts. Like it's a Saturday. They're in there on the weekend. They're like, first of all, dude, like you don't need to do this. Like you can chill out. Second of all, here's what we need help with. So after putting that stuff together for a couple of days for them, Wes kind of went up to me and said, hey, like, what's your deal? You're a young guy. You're here. You're not at a job. What are you doing? And I had just transitioned out of a business that I had operated for 5 or 6 years, and was trying to break into the liberty space. I had applied with all kinds of think tanks and stuff in the DC area, the usual names that probably pop into your head, all of the Koch network stuff, all of that. So I tell him that song and dance, and he says, well, like, we could use some help around here. We don't really have an opening or anything, but we can use some help. Let me, maybe I could find something part-time. I'd have to check with the chair. I'd have to check the budget. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come back Monday. If you have a job for me, it's my first day. If you don't have a job for me, then I'm here as a volunteer. And Wes said, that sounds like a pretty sweet deal. So I showed up Monday, and it was a part-time job. And that part-time job became a full-time job, and that full-time job became deputy director of operations eventually. And then when they needed an executive director. All told, including my tenure as executive director, I was there about 4.5 years.
Nice. That's pretty fucking cool. This was not one of the things that I had planned on talking about, but you mentioned trying to crack into the liberty space. And
yeah.
I think that's just an area that we're just lacking wholeheartedly. The job placement program within the movement is non-existent, and the problem is, the story is, well, nobody has money, nobody's hiring, no one's fundraising very well. there's maybe a couple of openings here or there, and then some presidential or big gubernatorial campaigns might hire some staff, and like that's about it. But then I'll go and talk to people from like the National Association for Gun Rights, and they're like, we have 7 open positions right now for full-time jobs that are, you know, $60,000-$70,000 a year jobs, plus the benefits of benefits of like flying around the country doing shit, and they can't find people. And I'm like, how is this? And you know, there'll be a petitioning drive like Larry Sharp's in 22 that we're hiring random people off of Craigslist and off of the street, paying them $30 an hour to collect signatures for Libertarian, something I know 40 people across the country that would sleep in their car for the ability to do. Like, there's no communication there at all.
Yeah.
And I guess, how do you think we could maybe move towards solving that problem?
Well, yeah, I mean, like one of the challenges that the Libertarian Party has, if you're talking about like capital L, capital P spaces, one of the challenges they have is just a real shortage of professionals, and it's a chicken and an egg problem. You know, the money's not there, so it's hard to create the opportunities for the professionals, and at the same time, that means that there's just this lack of professional knowledge within the party. There's very few who have like a long tail of history with politics, and even fewer that have a long professional history with politics. There are few, but there's not many, and the party has a hard time sustaining it as an ecosystem. I think it's an important thing for the party to focus on. Now, I will say, in the broader liberty space, where I was talking about, really, you know, where I was looking, there's a lot more out there, as you mentioned. And if anybody's listening to this and is not familiar with Claire Dixon and Talent Market, first of all, that's a great place to look for liberty-oriented job postings if you're a job seeker that's in the market for that sort of thing. Definitely check Talent Market as a place. Anybody who's done job seeking and, like, you know, has had like the million Indeed like robo email sort of thing knows what a black hole that is. Probably has a bad association with job boards. That's seriously the best job board in the liberty space, and you know, if you're going to check one, check that. I mean, there are avenues in. There are people working on
description for people.
What's that?
I said I'll make you give me a link to put in the description for people.
All right, yeah, I can furnish that. Unplanned plug. Reach out to me, Talent Market, if you want to compensate for that. So there are people who are certainly working that problem in the broader sense, like many things. The Libertarian Party. One of the things I was proudest of during my time as executive director was professionalizing a lot of aspects of the party, and it saddens me, and it's a secret to nobody, that the party has backslid a bit in that regard. But one of the things I really liked was harboring that environment where we could actually both financially sustain professionals in the party and start to train and give experience to professionals, put teams in the field, paid teams in the field of door knockers and that sort of thing behind targeted races, and start to build. Admittedly, it was scaled to what the party could do, but to start to build a reservoir of experienced campaign professionals within the LP space that were kind of born and bred here. We didn't have to import them from the GOP or from the Dems. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that I think is really important for the party to continue to do and to try to foster going forward, is creating that space where professionals can thrive. Yeah. There's this running debate that can happen sometimes especially during busy campaign cycles, even numbered years. Does the party have too few candidates or too few volunteers, right? Like, do we need more people working campaigns, or do we need more candidates running campaigns? And I'm always like the weird, obstinate libertarian voice in the back of the room going like, neither. We need more professionals. Like, I'm the no to vote in that argument. That's just like, it's not about volunteers or candidates. We have we have vanishingly small number of people who professionally know how to run campaigns, and very little ecosystem to support them.
Yeah, and I think just to riff on shitting on how libertarians run campaigns, I think one of the biggest...
Was that my topic?
One of the biggest gripes that I personally have with a lot of how it's worked is just, if you look at the business space, because I've bounced around quite a few different industries, but stayed in fairly similar job descriptions throughout most of them. I've usually been a sales manager or an HR or customer service, like something in there. I'm hiring, firing, training, and selling. Like that's basically all I ever do. And like, as you go throughout all of these different industries, they have a very streamlined way of operating. There are certain job descriptions that certain people fit, and if you bounce from, say, Chase Bank to Bank of America, and you're an accounts manager, it's the same job, right? Like pretty much. You have to learn systems or whatever. Even jumping department manager from like a giant I went from Lord & Taylor to a tiny little like boutique shop in New York City. Still the same job though. I was still organizing ties and ironing shirts. You go from comms director on the Larry Sharpe for Governor campaign to comms director for Lars Mapstead for president. Even though they're half of the same team, it's still not the same job, not even close. The people you're working with have been brought up in all of these different like hodgepodge campaigns and been trained that comms director means 7 different things that it shouldn't. And so you think you're supposed to be spread this thin, and then you're stepping on each other's toes, and then there's gaps because no one worked on a campaign that actually did that, or there was somebody else that's now missing from this puzzle. And you don't have that whole where you can walk into a Lord & Taylor, say, I'll pay everyone $1,000 to walk out right now and go start working at my other store down the hall in the same mall, and have an operational store that afternoon. Basically, you just can't do that with the way that we do campaigns. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles.
Well, it's something that's near and dear to my heart. It was certainly the biggest struggle I approached when I became executive director of the Libertarian Party, was taking, what I described not even as an org tree, but an org bush, right? And trying to like make organizational function.
I love that.
And it's not the personnel. I mean, I had one of the best teams that I've ever worked with at the LP, and I have one of the best teams that I've ever worked with on the Mapstead campaign. Like, I've been very, very fortunate to have fantastic people that I've been able to work with in the LP. It's absolutely not about the people. If the organization is, structured in a way where, like you said, people don't have those clearly defined boundaries, there's not a sense of where the puzzle pieces fit together. We as humans don't naturally create that. We are very adept at comporting to systems that confront us, but if those systems are absent, we tend not to organically structure and build them, at least not in the ways that are efficient in that sort of a context. And so it's it was something that I was very happy to do there. I'm happy to say that like I'm absolutely loving working with Team Mapstead. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe the people who work with me will tell you there's like a Tyler Harris way of doing it, and that's wildly different than everything they've done before. But I like to think that most of my job is to facilitate other people doing their jobs really well, by just helping provide the missing pieces where that structure is concerned. And maybe we need more of that in the party.
I don't know if I've ever related to a sentence a guest has said on the show more than that one. Like, my job is helping other people do their jobs well and filling in the gap. That's like exactly what I've done on every. That's why my absolute favorite job title, whether it's business, politics, or anything, is like assistant director or assistant manager. Like, I am fantastic number 2. I love being. The buck doesn't stop here. There's somebody else that has to actually like be big picture more often. I can have big picture ideas, but I don't have to like actually be paying attention to the whole thing. I just bounce from task to task and really like ADHD hyper focus through everything that I'm doing, and then just people manage. The last campaign I worked on as deputy, I basically managed the rest of the directors, and the CM managed the candidate. and that was just like the best org split I've ever had. I was like, I can do this all day. I just 10 hours a day of Zoom meetings with various like directors of a campaign in different places, and then or the campaign manager and the candidate, like just all day. It was so much fun. We did not do well. That campaign was trash. But the way we structured it was great.
So what you're saying is mileage may vary.
Right. Like the way we did it was fun and worked well for the people involved. The candidate was trash.
The ultimate KPI sounds like it may not have been there, but
right. So you already answered, I feel like, most of this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway in case there was anything left out. What was your big? What was the most of your goal for the LP when you came in as ED, and how do you think you did?
Oh, okay. I mean, like I've talked about one aspect of this, which was organizationally. You know, when I came into the job of executive director, it was widely considered that the job was impossible. And we just had amazing people that got swallowed by it, right? I mean, it was a lot piled onto that JD. So part of it was about taking this staff that had grown to a dozen people or more, and creating that organization behind it. We talked about that a little bit, but the other big challenge I had, so I came in right after the Joe Jorgensen campaign. And the highest membership count that we had in 20 years to that point, you know, as the Joe Jorgensen bump, if you look at those like membership graphs that the party will put out that have the, you know, you can see the membership across time. You see this huge bump in 2016 for Gary. You see an even bigger bump for Joe Jorgensen in terms of members engaging with the party. But you also will see the absolute crater that happens after the 2016 Gary Johnson campaign. Something like 40% of those new members in 2016 were retained, and 60% were lost. So I knew the big challenge going into 2020 was going to be a challenge of retention, and so we built the first. I don't like to make these declarative statements like the first fill in the blank in the party's history, because, people were doing things in the 1980s that I wasn't aware of. Don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the party's history going back, but certainly we built where one didn't exist before, a very systematic approach to donor stewardship, to member retention. We collapsed the idea of membership into fundraising. So just our full fundraising team cared about members and donors as though they were the same people. Many of them are the same people, so we're just like, this is a function, we're going to steward everybody, and built real systematized processes, specifically designed. Like, we knew we weren't going to grow the Joe number. We knew what the trend would look like. It was about tapping the brakes on that decline, and I think you see how much wider the Joe bump is than the Gary bump on those charts, and that's really what the focus of the team was on the stewardship side. And then the third focus was electing libertarians, which is what political parties do, is elect people to office. I'm a very campaign culture guy, if all of the stories of me working campaigns for the last 23 years haven't been a hint. So I came in and, certainly had the benefit of inheriting from a lot of really talented people who came before me, a focus that was already in that direction, right? We already had Apollo Pizzell working field teams. We already had Kara Schultz training folks and liaising with a lot of different candidates in the field. We already had budget for candidate support allocated by the time I came in 2020. And so, the goal was to, we had just elected Marshall Burt, the first state legislator in 20 years, to be elected as a libertarian. and so it was about putting support behind him legislatively, so that we could have an accomplished legislative sessions. We can go make the case then that libertarians aren't just a gadfly party. We're not just a protest vote. We're a legitimate party of government. You can go, you can elect us, things will happen. And so we put the resources behind making that happen. We put resources behind local candidates, which is why we had not just a really good financial year, but a really good electoral year in 2021. It's because that was the major focus area there. So I'd say that was sort of the three-legged stool of my tenure as executive director, was focusing on libertarian electeds, focusing on holding the line in terms of dampening that boom bust cycle to the extent that we can on membership, and then organizationally structuring the party in a way that it can support like real professional activity. And I have to say, I'm tremendously proud of the team. I know you've had other members of that team on already on your show, and tremendously proud of them and all of the work that we did during that period of time. It was fantastic. And
unfortunately, I've still yet to get either of the two names that you just mentioned. I need Apollo.
What's that?
I said, unfortunately, I've yet to get either of the two names that you actually just dropped. Neither
Strong
Apollo...
recommend.
Yeah, I've been... I don't know Apollo almost at all, and I do know Kara, and I don't know why I just haven't asked her, because every time I've seen her, I'm just like, I refuse to be that, will you come on my podcast, Libertarian? So I'm just like, whatever I'm with Kara, I'm just trying to be like the most helpful, least stereotypical libertarian she's ever seen, so that she likes me. Like,
please don't be mad at me, Kara Schultz. Kara, if you're watching this and you get a podcast invitation now, blame me, don't blame David. He's still a great guy. But no, we had a fantastic team on the dev side. I know you've had Gabby Cordova on before.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really great people. I'm happy they've all gone on to do really good work in other places after their tenure with the LP. I mean, super proud of what we did. Super proud of the all of the metrics that we were chasing. We hit. It was a good time, good tenure, and I'm certainly very proud of it.
Hell yeah. As you should be. I guess point of order. Question.
Please don't tell me this interview is gonna slip into Roberts.
Never. I just like using point of order and dilatory. That's it. So you said you came in after the Joe campaign. Who was ED from JBH's election till you came in, and when was that actually?
So Dan Fishman is my immediate predecessor in the role,
right?
And so he would have started. He would have started towards the end of Nick Sarwark's last term. He came in before JBH was chair, and I'll have to apologize to Dan when I see him. I can't remember the exact date. Prior to Dan was an interim executive director period where Lauren Doherty was acting as executive director after Wes Benedict departed. And Wes Benedict had been executive director for quite a while prior to that. I think Wes Benedict has like 2 discontiguous terms as executive director, but in total had been executive director for, I think, close to 10 years.
Gotcha. In my head, you were ED during the campaign, just because I didn't remember where that actual switch happened, and I just knew that you were the one that Joe brought in, and so in my head it was like that switch happened at the same time.
I was actually I started as interim executive director and then became a full-time executive, but I started acting in the role in late November of 2020, so right after the end of the Jorgensen campaign. And then carried through that midterm cycle until I guess it would have been end of July 2022.
Okay, nice. I definitely, I have to say, from the outside, I don't think I would have stayed in the party, and I definitely wouldn't have been nearly as active in the party and as gung ho as I was for a while, if that team wasn't there, and you guys weren't doing some of the stuff you were doing, and I could see a trajectory that looked like something different than what I had been seeing for the previous couple of years. Because like I was still watching
one of the
from a
most
distance
hugely
from,
flattering
like,
things that I've
2015.
heard in a while.
Well,
thank you for that. Thank you.
I will say, I definitely I had hopes that the new regime would carry on some of that. I know they wouldn't carry on all of that, but there was stuff that I had faith in them for, that has fallen through. Other stuff, I'm honestly gonna say they are knocking out of the park a few of the things that they said that they would do, and I am excited to see like more of Rechtenwald's campaign, because it looks like they have some interesting plans up their sleeve, from what I'm hearing. And I have Heist coming on in a couple of weeks to talk more about that. So I'm a little bit interested to see how this actually ramps up now that they've got a little bit of steam under them. But my biggest gripe is that you guys really never got that chance. You were there for just just a bit to be like, all right, now we've got it figured out. Now we can get going. And then whoosh, nope.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it. Like there was a very heavy sort of anti-professionalism in the sentiment coming in that was never going to blend effortlessly with what we had built, right? I mean, like there was a strong sense that a lot of doing things in a professional way came across to a lot of people on that side of the fence as either weak, insufficiently vigorous, somehow a diminished effort, right? And that's certainly never how I viewed it. I think it's important. The Libertarian National Committee is a corporation. It's LNC Incorporated.
Yeah.
The same as the RNC and the DNC are corporations, right? And so the idea that we run with certain professional standards that does come with certain internal bureaucracies. It sounds like you've had a pretty varied employment history. You've worked with, in corporate structures, you've worked in small business structures, you understand how they're different, how they're similar. But there's value in a lot of the way you create that professional distance and that professional separation of staff versus the other sides of the organization. And they're just, it seemed to me there was not the desire for that vision coming in. And so that's, that's going to be incompatible with a lot of what we constructed, just naturally. Now, obviously, my bias is towards what we constructed, but other people might hold different biases, and that's their prerogative.
My argument has always been that the establishment should be establishmenty, and if you look at the GOP. They have their Marjorie Taylor Greens, their Lauren Boeberts, even their Trumps to a point, who are anti-establishment, who are out there doing their wild shit that keep that 20-30% of the Republican voting population engaged, while the actual RNC members, I don't know who the executive director of the RNC is, but I'm guessing he wears a suit every day. That's a whole different side of things, and you're allowed to have both within a party, but it makes sense that the establishment would be boring and kind of
to create space for candidates to define how they're going to run and who they're going to be. And see, the thing that I think is perhaps underappreciated is that if you have a party structure that's ostentatious, right? Like if you have the Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greens running the RNC, if you have them doing payroll every Thursday, not only are they miserable and bad at that job, but they also are going to go out there and create a environment for the party where candidates who don't want to run that kind of campaign now can't not run it. If you're big and ostentatious and have all of that coming from the party structure, there's no room for any other style of campaigning. Whereas you can certainly have an ostentatious candidate come out and campaign while the party structure is a little bit more staid and a little bit, just drops into the backdrop. Nobody in their right mind, takes a candidate and forces them to answer for like how boring the administrative staff of their party is. But they absolutely will make candidates answer for messaging coming out of the party that is out there crowding the conversation out. So I think that there is a thing where when you have a more professionalized staff, when you have a more laid back is the wrong term, when you have a staff that does fade more into the background because they're doing work, they're not trying to take the entirety of the stage, then that leaves room on the stage for sort of all kinds of candidates to flourish and thrive and take that spotlight. Yeah. Now you could argue that the LP did or didn't have that at any window of time, but that's always been sort of my philosophy, is this idea of staff as above and beyond and impervious to like a lot of the inner party stuff and weighing into the big sexy hot button stuff, especially in our internal libertarian world. And I do think it's a shame that the party seems to have lost a lot of that the past year and a half.
Yeah, because it's not like the New Hampshire GOP is sane. Right, like they're a bunch of fucking whack jobs. They're mostly free staters, right? Like it's not like they're the average Republicans, and no one in Missouri is getting somebody knocking on the door from their local GOP and being like, well, why is New Hampshire trying to secede and the Republicans doing that? I'm not voting Republican anymore. I'm like that's just not it's not a thing, right? Everyone's just like, yeah, New Hampshire's fucking nuts. They're over there doing whatever. And in my opinion, if we were doing it right, which, to your point, you could argue that we never have been, or maybe were almost, or a bunch of different things. But if we're doing it right, we could run Gary Johnson for president and Jeremy Kauffman for Senate at the same time. Like those two campaigns don't have to be completely and totally at odds with each other. If we have
Republicans
party.
and Democrats house a whole litany of candidates,
right,
both in terms of like philosophical spectrum, but also in terms of just manner and comportment and the extent to which they're moored or unmoored from reality. These things are harbored within those parties. What those parties don't do that the LP does, and this is not like a modern LP problem. So don't read this as like a caucus criticism, because this way predates all of that. One of the problems that we have in the party systemically is that we've mirrored in a lot of our internal Libertarian Party structures the things that we hate about the system we're trying to change. So we've crafted a party that looks a lot like the electoral system that we bump up against. And that does two things. One, it creates all the same systemic pressures and incentives within the party. So we hate that we have these systems that push our national electorate towards a two-party system. We harbor a lot of those same systems internally. And you look, there oftentimes does tend to be like two-party factionalism within the LP, whether it's the radicals and the Prags, whether it's the Prags and the Mises Caucus, whether it's the Mises Caucus and the CLC guys. Go back to the early days of the party, and it's like minarchists and anarchists and all of that. But there always seems to be these systems that drive us to this this divisive internal two-party system. And the second thing it does, in addition to just kind of creating all the same flawed structures that we butt up against and dislike and recognize the flaws of when they're not internal to us, second thing it does is it then creates how can I say this and be nice to my fellow libertarians at the same time?
You don't have to be.
It encourages libertarians who want to role play at being in government. because our structures mirror those institutions that I think a lot of libertarians feel pretty hopelessly and permanently gated out of. It allows people who want to sort of show up for a session of like Model UN or like Model Congress, like when you're in high school, to show up and do that, and to use our party's institutions like the LNC, like the Judicial Committee of the LNC, like the state party central committees, to use those as proxies for sort of playing out a pretend internal electoral politics in a way that because it's a lot easier to win an election inside the Libertarian Party because all you got to do is beat other libertarians, right? It's a lot harder to go out and run in this system that we feel gated out of. And, because we feel gated out of it in the way that Republicans and Democrats don't, I think that's a challenge we face as a party that they don't. Somebody who wants to go run for office and wants to sit on a committee and feel important, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you can go run for your county board of supervisors. You can go run for Congress maybe, and you try to get it. You feel like you have that outlet. I think a lot of libertarians turn that energy inward, and that's an unhealthy thing for the party when it happens.
Yeah, no, I think you did a pretty good job of wording that nicely, to be honest with you. And I think you're also 100% correct. I say that because I'm guilty of it firsthand, right? Like, I joined the New York State Committee because I wanted to feel like I was actually doing something and making the world a better place and contributing to the liberty movement. And in reality, there's not one single thing that I did as a member of the New York State Committee that helped anything at all. Nothing I did helped. I put one motion forward in my last meeting. It did pass, but nothing happened from it. I did nothing else original. I was just a vote that went. I mean, I guess I helped pass a couple of things that might not have passed if some of the other people in my area would have been on the committee or whatever. Like, there's could be some argument that like I was the swing vote on a couple of things, but like there's 51 of us, so it's hard to be the swing vote on anything, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of other people to choose from, and I was there for a year and a half. I did nothing productive, but I felt like I was doing something productive.
Yeah.
And once every 2 months, I got to sit on a Zoom call and be part of the state committee and get to make motions and follow Robert's rules, and it was super fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it probably speaks to a failing of the LP that we care who's like on the Libertarian National Committee, right? And we do care. We care. And I think it's probably a bad thing. It probably means that those people have too much power. They're doing too much. We're fighting those contests too hard. We're turning that energy too much inward. And, Republicans don't care who's on the RNC. Democrats don't care who's on the DNC. Nope. They care who wins nominations. They care who's going to be on the ballot. They care who's running for office. That's where the focus is. Nobody feels represented by those committees. And I mean that in the sense of like, nobody feels like it's worth fighting for who the representative on those committees are, because they're represented by their candidates who are the message bearers, who carry the torch, who, they'll fight those primary contests really hard. But they're not fighting over who gets a committee seat somewhere. And I think it's probably, pretty telling of something systemically that we should be thinking pretty hard about as an LP when we think about why we do. Yeah.
I think the biggest slap in the face of this point that you're making was when I worked on the Tulsi Gabbard campaign, which was 2020, so obviously like pre-Reno, but in kind of one of the biggest climaxes of the caucus, or it was really just the battle lines were being redrawn. It was just before JBH won, so it was like heated him versus Josh, and I'm going around knocking on people that have been members of the Democratic Party for 20, 30 years, people that voted for fucking JFK and, just kept bleed blue. And I thought a good selling point for Tulsi Gabbard is that she's the former vice chair of the DNC. That seems like a nice little, like, remember that? Remember she was vice chair not too long ago and resigned to, like, stick up for Bernie Sanders after he, got screwed. And they're like, she was? They have vice chairs? What even is, who was chair then? Or, like, there was, it was just so many different things. Like, I thought she was resigning from her congressional seat. Like, just so many different things. No one knew who she was until she resigned from vice chair. It was the first time she came on the map for anyone. Not when she won vice chair, when she resigned. And I'm watching people losing friendships over JBH versus Josh Smith. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
I mean, like, I'm going to make the point that what you're seeing in the Democratic Party there is actually a sign of health.
Right. A little bit. Like, I feel like they should have known the whole, like, her resigning thing. The people that didn't get that was a little concerning. But not knowing who she was until then, I was like, you probably have friends that you meet up with at least, like, once every other week, don't you?
Well, and it's not that they don't care about their party. It's that they don't view that as where the beating heart of their party lies. And the other side of the flip side of this coin, you mentioned my tenure as executive director, and we talked a little bit about how proud I am of all the stuff that staff accomplished during that time period. That's also a time period where the LNC was like an open dumpster fire, right? I mean, it was absolutely. I mean, you had JBH's resignation term. You had several other resignations follow that. You had Ken Mullman acting as chair for a period of time. Nobody knew who the chair was going to be after that. You have Whitney Billieu essentially being drafted by the LNC to fill the spot. Whitney was fantastic as a chair, in my opinion. I loved working with Whitney, but that was, she didn't run for that role. And so there was a lot of, I guess salutary neglect would be the term. And that space where the LNC wasn't active, because the only thing it was actively doing was kind of falling apart, is a time that actually allowed the party to run really well. It allowed the party to accomplish good stuff. It reminds me of, I don't know if you remember a few years ago when, and I don't follow Spanish politics closely, but I certainly, it caught my attention when because of the results of the Spanish election, they couldn't form a government, and they didn't have a national government formed for like 9 months. And unemployment went down. The economy was booming. That it it was like nature had started to heal. and that's where my mind kind of goes with an analogy for the LNC is like, look back at when we practically didn't have an LNC because it was falling apart so hard. It was some of the most successful that the party's been in its modern history. And you have arguably the exact opposite since Reno. You have this party that is virtually 100% united in terms of control by like a single faction that has presumably this broad, strong mandate to come in there and really be very active in running the show, and it's one of the worst performances of the party in modern history. Maybe there's a lesson about government in here is I guess what that we can draw as libertarians.
I do love that. I'm definitely a member of the anarchist caucus, as far as I believe in the abolition of all national organizations, both government and private,
the public and private.
Yeah, like honestly, straight up, the concept of national is just dumb, and I think every libertarian gets that concept, and somehow we don't apply it to the party. But one thing I thought of a quick analogy of, I don't, when we were talking about like the Democrats and Republicans caring and not caring, I know I have quite a few friends that work at Walmart. I highly doubt any of them could name me the vice chair of the Walmart board of directors either. I bet they can all tell me who their store manager is, who their various shift managers in their department are, who their department head is, who the newest hire is. They probably know their store. They might even know they probably know their district manager, the one person that if shit goes down, they can go above store manager's head. They don't need to know anything beyond that. It doesn't matter who the vice chair of the board of directors is. And if you care that much about that kind of stuff, like maybe don't be working at maybe if you understand corporate structure that well, apply yourself elsewhere, because like the world needs you.
Well, and moreover, and we encounter this as consumers all the time, right? Because consumers have a lot easier time taking their dollar elsewhere than staffers taking their labor elsewhere.
Yeah.
But when we deal with private entities, we don't think about their corporate structure hardly at all.
No.
And a company that provides a good product at a good price, whether that is the corporate equivalent of effectively a shareholder democracy, right? Like a public company where people vote their shares and elects a board, and then there's a chairman of the board that selects a CEO that then runs and is answerable to this elected body, or whether it's a dictatorship, right? Somebody's grandkid that inherited the thing that's sole owned, and his word goes, and if he wants to, say, no, everything we make is purple now. He owns the universe and can tank the thing or can succeed or whatever.
Based.
You don't really care when you go into the marketplace to buy your very stylish tie. You know nothing about the corporate structure that led to its creation. You just know whether you like it, whether it's a good quality product, whether it's coming to you at a good price. You know whether the organization's running efficiently or not. You don't necessarily know or care how it's achieving that efficiency. That's the value markets have, where participation is voluntary, over the state, where participation is mandatory. And to the extent that we're going to replicate structures, we should replicate those private-like structures rather than those state-like structures, because I think you just get better results from it. You can tell I'm a little bit of a member of the anarchist club myself.
I love it. I think you said it best way earlier in the beginning. We're lacking experienced professionals, which in a way is one of our benefits. A lot, like the people that we have not being professionals is great, but we need other people who are. Is my point there? Because there are so many people that. I mean, I'm sure the people watching this are going to follow this conversation all the way through. But there's a chunk of the party that doesn't know what we're even talking about. When I had Eric Rodstep on to talk about his vice chair race, and he was talking about running to be the COO of the party and not the vice chair. I have multiple people, because as much as I was active at the time, I was whipping votes for him. He was about the only person that I really wholeheartedly supported going into Reno, and really the only person that I supported that lost, which is kind of annoying. But I was whipping votes for him and talking to people, and they didn't know what I meant at all. They had no idea. I had multiple people correct me, be like, "You mean CEO?" I'm like, "No. That's what Angela's running for. He's running for COO. Well, what's the difference? Can you have both? I thought it was a one or the other, like president or CEO." I'm like, come on, guys. So it's...
Well, you're touching on another thing that I think is really important, which when we go out and talk to people, whether we're in our world or whether we're outside our world, we bring a certain language from the LP that no one else speaks.
Yeah.
And if we want to be understood, we need to not speak that language to them. We need to speak their native tongue. And so we need to, at the very least, be bilingual in both LP and normal human.
Yeah.
And kind of go out and communicate that way. I do think that one of the things that's really encouraging. I'll make a slight pivot if you'll allow it.
Go for it.
one of the things that I find really rewarding about working with the Mapstead campaign is that it is cultivating an environment, for a professional political campaign. It certainly has more resources committed to it down the stretch at this point than any other campaign. We're spinning up, a lot of good, solid policy messaging that libertarians are going to like, but it's also going to be presented in a way that is directed primarily towards a general audience that we need to reach, because libertarians are already libertarians. That's not primarily who we're talking to. And also, engaging in the things that are necessary in this sort of climate. Like, I don't know if you've been following Maine ballot access very closely. The registration drive in Maine. We had enough organization in place where when the main party needed help getting that across the finish line, right, the Mapstead campaign was able to show up, was able to keep the petitioners on the ground. I think the campaign's put $25,000 into ballot access in Maine, either directly or indirectly, in terms of us putting the teams out there, also helping the state to support the state effort to put the teams out there, also advertising so that people are aware of the registration drives. And when I say advertising, I mean directly into Maine, to Maine voters, to let them know that as libertarians in Maine, their registrations had been effectively thrown away and that they needed to re-register. Getting that push made, right, like that requires a level of organizational structure there, so that when a state party says help and the national party says we can't, like there are campaigns this cycle that need to be able to ride to the rescue, when that's necessary to happen. So it is really good to see that happening within the Mapstead campaign. It's good to see that happening inside, when we talk about what's happening in the party. Like, I so desperately want libertarians to mean so much more than what's happening with the LNC. Yes. When Republicans talk about what's happening in the Republican Party, they don't just mean what's happening in the RNC. When Democrats talk about what's happening in the Democratic Party, they don't just mean what's happening in the DNC. And so when we talk about, is there room for professionalism in the LP? It's like there actually is an ecosystem. It needs to be bigger. It needs to be cultivated. It needs to be grown. There is an ecosystem that still thrives. The professionals, for the most part, have not gone away. We're still here. We're not in the LNC anymore. We're still here in the party, still doing work. And I think that's, maybe I'm back on the white pill. I don't know, but that's I think it's not perhaps as grim as we may have given the impression.
I've been kind of beaten over the head with white pills lately. Last week I had Jack Hunter on the show, and he was cramming them down my throat too. So I'm getting there. Honestly, it's starting to teeter. I think having a 10-month-old is definitely a big factor there. It's like, I kind of have to hope that the world doesn't end when he's in like elementary school. Like, I have to hope that I'm doing something that's actually worth doing here. Otherwise, that mindset would make me a shitty parent. So I just can't let myself get there, right?
Well, no, and you know what? Like, you're playing the odds. You're playing the odds when you say, like, is the world still going to be here when he's a year and 10 months? Is it going to still be here when he's 2 years and 10 months? It's going to be here when he's 3 years and 10 months. Yeah. The overwhelmingly likely answer is yes.
That is true. I will say, when my wife came to me the other day and said, how do you feel about me trying to, have us consume a lot more things that are like from scratch and like stuff that I make, and like, like sourdough bread, and maybe like having some chickens in a small garden. I was like, yeah, that's okay. That's definitely okay with me. We can start, and I want to learn how to can. And I was like, yeah, we can start a stockpile down in a bunker. Like, we're going. Like, she started asking me permission to start homesteading. And I was like, you're talking to an anarchist. Like, I love everything you're saying right now. This is like goals.
Yeah, it's like, no. And you're really talking my language. Just from an Epicurean point of view, you want to say yes to all of that stuff. Homemade sourdough bread's delicious.
Right.
When I'm not doing campaign work, I will say Lars Mapstead killed my sourdough starter, because when I'm not busy, I maintain it, but I'm too busy now to really be doing everything I'd like.
Them
but
some fighting words. You might have hurt
those
his cred. You might have lost him a couple votes there.
Oh no, it's a good thing to be this busy, trust me. But when I'm twiddling my thumbs, I definitely love to there's nothing better than homemade sourdough than stuff that you're pulling out of the garden, fresh baked stuff. This past year I started bottling my own hot sauces. So that's a good thing to get into if you've got a good source of, if you can source peppers. That might be a good doomsday prepper skill. See, I'm not opposed to prepping.
Me either.
As long as you do it with a little sophistication. That's my catch. Just want to upscale it a little bit, because the end of the world should not mean sacrificing the finer things. Right. But yeah, no, it's that's a good thing. That's fun. And congratulations, by the way. I didn't know you had a young one in the house.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful thing. If there's ever there's no more powerful incentive to start sort of reevaluating the way you view the world, and I don't just mean politically. I mean the way you view just about everything in the world. It all seems open at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing. I think there are very few times in life where people are as open-minded as when they have those major life changes. When they're married, when they have a kid, when they when life seems to kind of open all possibilities. That's a really good and special thing. So I'm very pleased to hear that.
You have to be open to all the possibilities, because at the beginning of the day today, I thought that we were going to go real quick shopping and then spend most of the day at the zoo and a park and having like a whole big fun day. And then my 4-year-old decided that he was going to just be crazy all day, the entire day. So we didn't go to the zoo or anything else. We did a little bit more shopping than we planned on and ended up getting home early. It was like a completely different day than what we all thought we were doing when we woke up. And so, you just kind of, if I was still the way that I was as a teenager, where like any deviation from my daily plan kind of sent me spinning, if I was still that kind of like, well, it's got to go this way type thing, I wouldn't be able to handle days like today, where honestly it didn't bother me at all. Like it was okay, so we're doing this instead. All right, I have another store we can go to since we didn't find what we were looking for there. We can go over here, just like keep it rolling. He ended up calming down. We had a great night. We watched Santa Claus 2. And it was, turned into a good day, but it's just, you have to be open-minded. Otherwise, just the craziness of the children will send you a tailspin.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a good thing. That's one of the ways they make us better people.
Amen. Hear that. I want to tie in your what we were talking about before your pivot and the pivot to go to like messaging plus Lars. I think the reason that Lars is, I don't think I've said this publicly. The reason that Lars is my number one currently is,
I appreciate that resounding endorsement that we will clip and ensure is widely known.
The main reason there is to your point about being able to speak to people the way that they need to be able to be spoken to. I don't personally believe in the viability of the Libertarian Party. Myself personally, I am an anarchist that has taken a bunch of black pills, and I don't think that there's no chance that Lars wins. There's no chance that any libertarian ever wins president of the United States. That's my personal opinion. But I firmly believe that there are a bunch of people out there who the best way for them to learn libertarianism is through the LP, the way I did. I went from a statist to a liberty Republican to a libertarian to an anarchist, and you can't expect people to jump right from statist to anarchist. That would be insane. And so there are a lot of people out there a lot of my close friends and family, that I am slowly, evangelizing them into the liberty movement. And I've had a pretty good slate of candidates, minus Joe. But in New York, it was Johnson, Sharp, which was a pretty good, palatable, kind of prag, but stands out, kind of goofy, and like kind of a people person kind of a thing. These are people that I can actually bring my parents to an event. Like, my parents have met Larry Sharp 2 or 3 times now, and they like him. My dad thinks he's crazy and doesn't, believe in half of what he says, because my dad's kind of a pessimist. But, they like him and they enjoy voting for him. And, I will likely be able to get them to put like a yard sign up next time around or something like that, because they've actually gotten to know and like. Lars is in my personal opinion, the only candidate running at the moment that fits the bill of, I can talk to the people around me who are liberty curious about this candidate and get them engaged. Josh Smith is a candidate that I can talk to people who are already liberty minded, but not in the party or really active in the movement, who are already there philosophically, get them engaged, but not the people who aren't there on the philosophy yet and kind of still need to be brought in. Lars, in my opinion, is really the only one. Termont's close, but Lars is definitely the best. And his kind of like humble beginnings to big business thing of, he can speak a lot of those different languages. He can talk kind of normal people. He can talk business to businessmen. He can talk a lot of those different things and empathize with their hardships. And so I'm a big fan of not necessarily the messaging that the campaign has had, but just the opportunities that they have with messaging, given who he is and his background and the policies that you guys are working on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you need message and you need resources, and the Lars campaign has both of those. That gets you a long way down the field. I think that the other thing you need a way to maximize the two of those together. That's the third important element. And I think that delivering that message, like, this is going to be a year in all likelihood that's going to draw a lot of attention to, let's say, non-standard presidential candidate choices. We've got already a wide field where the media is loving to talk about independent candidates that are throwing in and what the field is going to look like. You've got polls like the Wall Street Journal poll recently that included, 8 candidates in the poll, or 6, 7, 8 candidates. You've got a desire to view this as a wide field in a way that normally doesn't happen in mainstream consciousness around these things. We follow it as libertarians. Most people don't. Most people think that every election is essentially a 2-person race. And this cycle has the potential to be very different. And so having that message that can reach out to people in a language that they understand. And I think you're absolutely right about the way that Lars talks to people. I think when Lars says that, the system that we're dealing with is rigged, he says it to a room full of libertarians. You see everyone going like this, because we're thinking about all of our issues. We're thinking about ballot access. We're thinking about all of this other stuff. We're thinking about our understanding of monetary policy and the Federal Reserve. We're thinking of all this. And Lars is thinking of all those things too. But when you see him talk to a room full of normal people and say the system is rigged, you see all the heads going like this. And they're not thinking about the Fed, right? But what they are thinking about is that every day, every day they see prices go up at the grocery store. Every day they're feeling the pinch. They get a sense, even if they can't articulate it, that things are not right in our system right now. And Lars is the candidate more than any other this cycle that I've seen go out and engage people on that front, very directly, very plainly, in a way that is, like you said, in a way that he can speak that resonates with a lot of different types of people, because he's been, kind of rags to riches. He can go, living room to boardroom and talk to people in a language that's going to resonate with them. I think that's really important. That's really powerful. And the fact that we're building a real professional campaign behind that's going to help him, get that out to people. We're not looking at making sure we have gas in the tank through May. We're looking at making sure we have gas in the tank through November, because that's what the Libertarian Party needs, a candidate that's able to do. We were talking earlier about how we shouldn't focus so much on our internal contests, right? The key question is not what candidate has the best shot with delegates. The real question we should be asking ourselves is which candidate here has the best shot with voters and carrying a libertarian message out to people outside the party. Because I think you're right. That's the core value that running a national candidate presents.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I'm just a firm believer of like any and all. I was talking about this earlier with the kind of like the ex-party members. I don't even know if I actually made the point. I think I got lost. But just the tearing down of the thing behind you as you leave is just not necessary. There's so many different people out there who could be radical, libertarian, volunteers, candidates, donors, or staffers by this time next year. And whether that's the Cato Institute that fires them up, or a candidate, or Firearms Policy Coalition, or You Are the Power, it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're able to find whatever thing it is that's going to fire them up. Because if they find the wrong thing, they might get turned off, or they might get burnt out because they're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. But I think part of my biggest mission, why I have the show and why I try to do what I do with free speech media and everything else, is to try to help people know how many different options there are out there of getting involved and using your energy, and how many different places you can point people so that they don't get burnt out doing the wrong thing, and that they can actually like find something that's awesome to them. And there are so many people out there that a good, solid, radically pragmatic presidential candidate in 2024 that's going out there saying unrig the system, something very palatable that just kind of, it doesn't turn really anyone off. You can go crazy on top of that to bring the crazy people in. You can go even more milquetoast from that if you have to bring those people in. But like just something like that. There's millions of people out there that's what they need.
Yeah.
And I just think that group is so much bigger. And to your point about like the system is rigged, it doesn't matter what they're shaking their head about at all. When you say the system is rigged, they might be thinking about the Fed, but it doesn't matter, because you're not saying end the Fed, you're not saying defund the police, you're not saying any of these other catchphrases. You're saying the system is rigged. So everyone in the room has felt that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just the DMV sucks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's really powerful. We might forget as libertarians, because we empower ourselves in this way all the time. It's really powerful to be given permission to feel like you deserve better than that. Right? Like the system is rigged. Things are rigged against you. It absolutely sucks. You deserve more respect than you're getting from your government. You deserve more dignity than you're being shown by the system as it exists now. You have more value than this system that's degrading you. And we tell ourselves that, we internalize that, we really feel that, we become accustomed to feeling that. That's a really potent thing. When you deeply feel that the system is wrong, but you've always just accepted it, and you view it as unchanging, to say that you have a right to demand that system changes, is a message that might sound trivial to libertarian ears, might sound trite. That can be a real revelation to somebody who has not internalized that message before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the key things is not to be preaching that the system is rigged, but to be preaching unrig the system.
That's right.
Which is a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, it's the message of empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You are the power.
Exactly. The message
you are
of
the power
empowerment
to unrig the system. Mapstead Cohen 2024. Kidding.
We got David Fite's endorsement and David Fite encouraging Spike's endorsement.
Spike would
all on
murder
one.
me if I ever actually publicly suggested that he run for anything, even president, let alone VP again. But Jesus, I'm gonna get in trouble for that one. But yeah,
I apologize. I'm never gonna get asked back, am I?
Oh no, this is so much fun. I am loving this. So tell me a little bit about what you are doing for Lars. What's your day to day on the campaign?
Yeah, well, so I mean, we talked about this a little the last time you had me on. I think that, you know, I have a very broad prompt right now with the campaign, which is really fun, and I really enjoy, because what it means is I get to focus on what we talked about earlier, is helping take the folks who have those really targeted mission-oriented roles on the campaign, finding out where the gaps are, finding out what they need to be able to thrive and be successful in those. It's effectively a project management type role of you know, figuring out how to get everything running smoothly and synergistically, get everything firing on all cylinders, help enable and empower the fantastic team that he already has in place, because he's already built a stellar team that's there. We've got amazing people on board, and it's about mobilizing that team in a way that's going to maximize their effectiveness, helping Lars maximize his effectiveness, helping us make sure that the Libertarian Party is seeing everything that he's doing. It's been a tremendously active campaign, and one of the things that I think we can and are going to start doing a better job of is the visibility of how tremendously active the campaign has been. You know, we have this huge impact in Maine that we help out with. We have, Lars did a few weeks ago did a 10-day tour hitting 6 states across the eastern seaboard. He's doing a lot of retail work with people, good old-fashioned kissing hands and shaking babies, as they say, and letting that be more visible, letting that be more seen, letting that resonate more, so that our libertarians can feel proud of this work that's happening out there. It's important work that it happens out there, but it's also important that we see it, so that we feel included and engaged by it and a part of it. And so it's just about helping all of those functional areas click and thrive and organize. It's all under the umbrella. You know, one of the things I did after I left as executive director was I started up my own consulting firm, management and strategy consulting, targeting specifically our libertarian and other third-party spaces. And, it's very much my wheelhouse to try to figure out how to maximize the potential of teams that get pulled together. So that's what I'm doing with Lars, and I'm loving every day of it. Every day is different. Every day is exciting. It's a good thing, and I get to work with absolutely wonderful people, and it's a growing team. So I will tease for your audience that we will likely have some announcements coming out soon. That the team's gonna add a few more folks. I will no longer be the newest member of Team Lars Mapstead very soon here, as we continue to grow and bring more people on who are widely respected in the party, who are, like you said, Lars is building something that's for the whole of the Libertarian Party, that is an effort that everybody can get behind, and we can have a real impact for liberty together. I think that's something a lot of people really desperately want right now in the LP, is an LP where we're not dividing ourselves up, but where we're finding something to all push for together.
Yeah. I'll break the fourth wall for a second. I have written one of the newest members just in case. And then I read it wrong. And I was like, if someone else came on since you and I'm wrong about this, I know someone in the audience is going to give me shit for this.
Well, not now. See, we've lampshaded it.
This
is how it's done in the business.
Yeah, I love it. So before I let you go, tell people how to find you, how to find Lars, how to get involved, donate. Tell me what specific volunteer positions you guys are hunting for right now.
Yeah, well, so my consultancy is Open Flank Strategies. You can find me at openflank.com. But what I really want you to do is I want you to check out Lars Mapstead. I want you to go to lars24.com. That's what's up on the screen. I am also on the Twitter place. I see my Twitter handle there at Tyler John Harris. You can find me there as well. I make no promises that the content will be worthwhile if you look at me on Twitter. I do promise that the content will be worthwhile if you go to lars24.com and check that out. Get involved with the campaign. Sign up for email notifications. One of the things that's really important as a show of strength is donor headcount. So, we talked about how we're mobilizing a lot of resources. We absolutely would welcome, $5 a month, $10 a month, throw a little in the kitty to help show that we're building an army here behind the effort. And check us out. Email, volunteer, become a delegate, and go to your state party conventions, go to the national convention, and participate in the nominating process for the party. And then even if you're not going to do those things, still check us out, because as we mentioned, we're doing a lot of outreach. We're doing a lot of work outside the party and campaigning outside the party, carrying the message. So show up, sign up, volunteer. And that's a fantastic way to get involved there.
Hell yeah, guys. I wasn't planning on actually making an endorsement, actually likely ever, but I basically did. You heard him. Go sign up, follow, do all the things, donate, but definitely sign up to be a volunteer, because that's how we do things. We are actively and aggressively right now building out the state organizing teams. So even if you think gosh, a national campaign, I don't know if that's really for me. We're building out the organization in your state right now. I guarantee no matter what state you're in. So hit us up at Lars24. We'll put you in touch with the team, and you can help us organize all around the country. Hell yeah. So all of those links are in the description, as well as all the link to Tyler's Twitter, the show's Twitter, the network's Twitter, the Rumble, the everything. Like the video right now. I can see that there's a bunch of you watching, but none of you have liked it yet. So do that right now. I can see who some of you are because you're commenting. So I'm going to hold this personally against you if you don't. And share this around so that everyone can be a part of this great conversation. And come on back. This is probably the last Fight for Liberty of the year. I might do one more around my birthday, 29th or 30th. We'll see. But come on back next year. We've got comedian Tyler Morris, former Hatchery employee Spike Cohen, former chair of the Mises Caucus Michael Heiss, likely Lars Mapstead, and a whole bunch of other people coming on back in 2024. So definitely subscribe to the channel, follow all the things so that you know when all of these episodes are coming out. And Tyler, thank you so much for coming on. This was absolutely fantastic.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It was a blast. Have a good night and a happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Until next time, keep up the fight.